promise to help each other, celebrate the joys of life, and to console each other.
Hello. I am sorry, but I must interrupt this show.
You know what it is? Hey, Ham Solo. It's time, baby. Low. Let's turn out we do. Hey.
They said we said we hit. They said we said we on. They said we said we strong. They said we said we go. We say that you heard right. 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 They said we said we hit. They said we said we on. They said we said strong. They said we said we go. We say that you heard right. We say that you heard right. We say that you heard right. We say that you
Man, I swear that it's imminent. I've been going so hard on my penmanship. About to go in and buy me a whip. And I pull that shit fresh off the dealership. I can leave you in red like an Xbox. Got me laughing at you like you red fox. Got you chasing Hot Wheels like a matchbox. EA running the game and it don't stop. Super cold like I'm playing for Blizzard. Got you all in my sights like Red Dead Redemption. Never gonna slip on my pimpin'. Better get out my way, bitch, I'm on a mission. Really ain't no competition. I'm steady grilling opposition. I'm get up and ready to win. They can play it how they play, but fuck what you say. I'm getting this money today.
Last of us like a dying breed, down the ride like a noble steed. Fatality moves, I make it bleed. That's on any game, that's on any screen. Shut up and give me your money. They said we so lit. Even if I take an L, we coming back just to show that we don't quit. They said we said we hit. They said we said we on. They said we said strong. They said we said go.
Yo, what's cracking, everybody? Welcome to a new episode of Behind Them Six with your boy Ham Solo 05 Gaming. It's been a long time. Or actually, it's been that long. I'm over exaggerating a little bit, but it's been a couple months, I think, since I did a Behind Them Six episode. And I just so happen to have Mr. Marcus Stewart here with me today, scheduled. I scheduled him a little over a month ago, I want to say. Is that about right?
Something like that. Or I guess it was just like almost a month, something like that. Time.
Yeah. I know it was. It wasn't like last minute or anything.
No,
we had this thing scheduled for a little bit, but I'm happy to have you here, Marcus. Before I go on ahead and let you introduce yourself, I'm gonna go on ahead and say hello to some of the folks in the chat. I see Holly, Spice Wolf, Stone King, Ray Chi, probably gonna be hopping in here in a few moments or whatnot. And
wait, Holly Spice Wolf is here.
What's that?
I was like, Holly Spice Wolf is here. I know Holly's from Weapon All the Game Informer chats.
There you go. They're on the screen right there. You can see.
What's up?
What's cracking? Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. But I have brought you guys here today. So you guys, if you've been here on this channel before and seen interviews, I talked to all sorts of different types of people. This is not like the first time. I've talked to like Seamus Blackley. I've talked to Jerry Hook. He used to be part of 343, and now he has his own business, Jar of Sparks. So I mean, we've been doing this thing for a couple years. I just took a little bit of break, but I'm happy to come back with Marcus Stewart here today. He still is a writer, but he was previously a writer for Game Informer magazine. Correct?
Oh yeah.
Want to make sure I got that right. I grew up buying those magazines, and you get one a month, but I get it from you get it from GameStop, or back in the day it was called Software, etc. But
whoa,
yeah, yeah. So I'm happy to have you here today, brother. Go on ahead, let everybody know where they can find you now, because the whole Game Informer thing. But let everybody know where they can find you now. I do have some of the links and stuff in the description as well. So if you're looking for his specific takes, you can definitely hop on those specific websites as well. I try to show the respect that is deserved to some of these writers and stuff like that. Just so their whole point is to get that stuff out there so you guys can check it out. So check it out. But yeah, Marcus, please go on ahead and let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess on the social media, you can find me on Twitter at Marcus Stewart 7, which is the number 7. I've got a Twitch channel that I've kicked the dust off of in the last couple weeks and been streaming. That is called Marcus Streams Games. Incredibly straightforward, so it's easy to remember. And then most recently, I started working as a contributor for the Indie Informer, which is a site focused on covering the indie scene.
Yesterday,
yeah, it was actually founded by
new?
relatively. It was started about, I want to say, almost 2 years ago now, but it was My former coworker and also former Game Informer editor, Jill Grote, founded and runs that. But me and two other ex-staffers that were also affected by the Game Informer shutdown have all signed up to help contribute on that. The other two being Wesley LeBlanc and Charles Hart. So we're over there now. It's a Patreon funded, independent website. So, we'd love it if you gave your support independent games media.
Was because like obviously that's a hell of a close name to the prior.
Oh, of course.
Right? Did the person that created the Indie Informer have something to do with Game Informer previously and was like, yo, this would be a good merge and also kind of have part of the name so people can kind of have some familiarity with it. But, Indie is like the big catch in this piece.
Yeah, it was founded by Jill Grote, who used to be an editor at Game Informer. We worked together, and she left in 2022 right after those layoffs that affected 3 people. She was not affected, but she left almost immediately after because she just I don't know her full reasons, but I would imagine she wasn't like super pleased with how that all went down. But when she was a Game Informer, she was very much sort of the like following the indie scene. That was her beat, I remember the year in 2022, she was very much her champion for Tunic because that was the year Tunic came out.
Yeah.
So I just remember
that was a big deal when that game came out.
The game's great.
It was done by like a single developer, right?
Yeah, more or less, yeah. So she spun off her own thing where she could focus on just the site that is just focusing on her primary games beat. And yeah, she's had a few contributors there, and now we are the latest batch. So we're just a bunch of informers going to inform about a more like narrow or more specific part of the video game market.
That's awesome. All right, so to take it a little step further, I got more questions to ask you, but before I do that, I will ask everybody that's watching. Please take a second. What's cracking, Big Mad Mo? I see you in the chat. Same with Cygnus. It's good to see you guys. Please take a second out of your time. Hit the like button. Share this thing out. Let everybody know that we're live on and cracking here on the TSWS Gaming YouTube channel. It's been a while since I did Behind Them Six, so I'm going to be a little rusty. But I'm going to have a good time regardless. Got a good brother here with me today to talk about games. So where I wanted to kind of go with this is I kind of wanted to, rewind. I wanted to hit the, rewind button 2 times like you used to do on the VCR, right? 2 times. You hit it a second time and go a little faster, right? Sometimes it goes a little faster.
But old days when life was simpler.
You remember them times, right?
And also more complicated because you really shouldn't have to hit a button twice to do a different function, but that's how it was.
It was all about speed. Now we have like the 4. I mean, like the 2, the 4, the 8, the 16, and whatnot. But back in the day, we just had 1 or 2. But anyways, with that being said, so way back in the day, let's talk about like childhood real quick. Like just let's brush over it real quick. Of course, in the gaming sense, what was like your first experience with video games? Was it like in an arcade? Was it like sitting in front of a TV with the pops or the moms or like brothers or what? Like what was cracking? What was the console that was popping during that time?
This is the most boring origin story because it's probably the most repeated one for probably like my generation or maybe our generation of gamers.
Here
but
the Mario.
My earliest memory is having an NES, and the first game I ever remember owning and playing was Super Mario Brothers on NES, and it was the Duck Hunt combo of it specifically. Though we didn't really play Duck Hunt because my mom like hid the guns from us because I guess she thought we weren't like ready for like digitized duck hunting. That didn't work forever because we eventually found out where she hid them. And there were occasions where like, let's go play some Duck Hunt. But it was always Mario. Mario was like, oh, okay, what is this world? Okay, I can get into this.
Marcus like, I found the strap. Let's go play.
Exactly. Did you know you can turn the gun sideways and it does more damage?
Trying to get it. That's wild. You right up to the TV too.
They're really trying to just do it to that stupid dog that laughs at you.
Oh yeah, right. So as you said, like that's a story that a lot of people had at the beginning of their, gaming journey. It was a lot of people, Mario, right? NES. It's either that, Atari, or something like almost like PlayStation or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But here's where things usually take a little bit of a shake, right? Is when I ask this question. So after you got your first taste on gaming, when did you like at what point did you realize, hey, I think I'm a gamer?
It's weird because that term didn't really exist until.
Right.
Isn't a story that was like a term that was created by like EA or a publisher, like the first time it ever appeared in print, which is hilarious because I think gamers, or what we think of gamers today, are so I think they think it's more of a grassroots thing than it actually is. Or it's like, oh no, I think it was actually like a corporate created term that just sort of proliferated throughout the fandom. But I guess maybe in the 90s during like the PS1 generation, just because it's weird I feel like when you're a kid, you like video games, it didn't feel like special to say you were a fan of video games because all your friends like video games. And it was like the same thing as like owning a bunch of toys, where like you wouldn't say like I'm a toy guy because I have a bunch of toys. Like, yeah, every kid does. So like but in terms of like focusing on having a real collection, I think the PS1 was the first time where I was like, well, I would like to own a wide variety of games. And I didn't have an allowance or money. So I got all my games back then outside of like birthdays and Christmases, which sucked because it would only come towards the end of the year because my birthday's in November. But like I would trade stuff with other kids to get their games, like toys. Because, that was back when, as a kid, you don't have any real monetary value for things. So like a $10 action figure was totally the equivalent of like an $80 game. And I would trade toys and Pokemon cards because this is like the height of like the initial Pokemon craze. And I would just be like, oh, because I would play, like, get new games, and then also I would subscribe to PlayStation Underground, and I would get those demo discs, and that was like my first window into like, oh, these are games that haven't come out yet. I
remember those things, and those
yeah,
little PlayStation. It used to come in the plastic bag, right? And you had to rip it open.
Really fancy too. You're like part of like this secret membership.
Too much. Yeah, bro.
Then you tell your friends like, I played this game that hasn't come out yet, and they're like, what? Got it from Pizza Hut.
Pizza Hut. Freaking wasn't it Taco Bell as well later on?
Oh, was it? I don't know. I got mine from Pizza
like
Hut.
During the Xbox, there was like some Taco Bell thing.
Okay, I could see that. Taco Bell.
I know there was Mountain Dew caps.
Okay, I mean Mountain Dew, the official drink of video game fans. So yeah, they would get on the ground floor pretty early with that, I would imagine.
As an adult, I can't even mess with Mountain Dew anymore, bro.
I was never a big Mountain Dew guy, which I know is blasphemy. Like I stopped drinking soda in high school, so I'm not even a soda guy. But like,
wow.
Outside of Baja Blast every now and then, I would indulge in that every now and then at a Taco Bell. But outside of that, Mountain Dew was always kind of like the Three Musketeers of like soda, where it's like I will never buy a Three Musketeers, but if it's in front of me, like a little fun dish of tiny candies, yeah, I'll eat one.
Absolutely, but yeah, you ain't lying. That Baja Blast is like the trap card, right? They're like it's gonna like for some reason I don't know what they doing with that specific Mountain Dew and why they kept it under wraps with just Taco Bell for so long. But
it's probably one of those things where like, hey, we don't think it'll be that big of a hit. We can afford to let one restaurant have it, and then it became a huge thing. And I don't know. I'm sure Taco Bell was happy. I don't know what the cut that Mountain Dew got out of it. But yeah.
Well, if you think about it, like Taco Bell and Pepsi, they're the same company. So,
true. Yeah.
I mean, they're different entities within the same, within
like
Pepsi.
Soft drink umbrella. Yeah.
Right. Like it's weird to think that Pepsi owns Taco Bell or Pizza Hut and stuff like that, right? But they do.
Yeah, I think Yum Foods just owns everything now.
Really?
I don't know. I feel like I see their names a lot when it's like, oh, who owns Popeyes or something? And it was like, Yum. They own Pizza Hut too, I think. I don't know.
All right, so I want to hear now because we kind of skipped a little bit. You went from NES being, your starter kind of like kicking off, trying out games for the first time kind of console. And then you evolved into being more like you evolved, and then you hopped on the PlayStation. And you were like, hey, I want to have a curated collection of a bunch of different games and stuff like that. This is pretty dope. What was like some of the games that really helped form your decisions while growing up to like how did you go from Nintendo to PlayStation? Was there like a particular game that like caught your eye and you're like, I need that, and then another game, and then another game?
Not really. It was really like the dumbest reasoning. So I grew up like with an NES, and then I did have a Super Nintendo, and I had a Sega Genesis at the same time. It was my first time having dual consoles. And then when the PS1 and N64 generation came around, like I could only have one, and I would have gone N64 just because like, oh, I know Nintendo, PlayStation's like a new thing. I don't know what to expect from this. But then I saw that it used CDs, which was like pretty new technology, especially for games at the time, like CD-ROMs. And in my mind, that like was incredible to me. Like I was like, whoa, video games can be on CDs. And I legit was like, this is the most futuristic thing I've ever seen. This is basically Star Trek. I want the future machine. And that is literally the sole reason I chose a PlayStation. And it's like, and every time I think about it now, it's like, that is the dumbest reason to pick a platform, especially one that was at the time completely unproven. And thank God it worked out that the PlayStation was as successful and had such a strong library. Because I mean, and also thank God I didn't like, I don't know, find out about the 3DO before that and was like, whoa, or the Philips CDI, and was like, oh my God, disc, I gotta have a Philips CDI. There's Mario's on that. I gotta play Mario is Missing and those terrible Zelda games. So yeah, that's literally, I didn't see any games on PlayStation. It was just like, oh, I like the disc format. I want to feel modern and new. Give me that.
Okay. All right. So hopping from the PlayStation, like obviously at that time you're a lot older than you were on the NES. Let's talk about like high school time now.
Sure.
Right. So like, what was the thing while you were in high school?
So I started high school in 2002, from 2002 to 2006 for my high school years. So it would have been PlayStation 2, original Xbox and GameCube generation. The PS2 was my console of choice because I loved the PlayStation. So I stuck with PlayStation. I never had a GameCube or an Xbox because, again, this is still the point where I can only afford to have one. And it wouldn't be until later in high school that I got my first job and then started like buying everything. But yeah, PS2 all the way. God, so the PS2 has one of the best libraries ever. So it was a lot of
it's so strong.
Either just playing like the follow-ups of my PS1, like favorites like Metal Gear, Final Fantasy, God, what else? Jeez, a little bit of Crash Bandicoot, but then discovering just all those new franchises that would define the PS2 generation, like a God of War, Devil May Cry. God, there's so many. I'm just forgetting the list because the PS2 had so many great games, like the Capcom stuff, like Okami and eventually RE4 when it came to PlayStation. Because I love Resident Evil on PS1, and also just the the PS2 was my first experience with online play once they released that network adapter, because that was like the thing on Xbox early on, right? And I remember just the concept of playing online with friends was so like whoa, I didn't know you could do that. And I should also preface all of this by saying that I was not a PC person growing up. We didn't even have a PC in my house. So like all the stuff, like anything that was like, I guess, established on PC first was just like completely foreign to me. Because there are some games you could play online or with friends on PC back then, but I didn't know that. So yeah, it was like the PS2 was sort of like my first real gateway into, I guess, what would become sort of like modern standards now. And then I would play the other two at friend's house. Like I remember playing Halo 1 for the first time at a friend's house because he had the Xbox day one, and he got Halo at launch. And I remember him inviting me over, and it's like, have you heard of this game Halo? And I'm like, what is this? and him and I just playing multiplayer together. And at that point, my only real
Great.
experience with shooters was GoldenEye. And I loved GoldenEye, and I was always looking for something that was like GoldenEye, because before first-person shooters became like a term, at least for me, I just thought of like, oh, I want a game that's like GoldenEye. I didn't know that was like the genre to me. It was like GoldenEye
Right.
games.
Yeah. We didn't call them FPSs back then. We just,
Yeah.
a GoldenEye like experience, like Perfect Dark was GoldenEye like, right?
Exactly. What we call Souls likes now is like, oh, James Bond likes, I guess. And again, not growing up with PC, I missed the Doom train really. Which we, so those, I feel like console gamers like GoldenEye was Doom for them, and so I remember being blown away playing Halo, and then some of the other games that came out for that and the GameCube, just playing it at a friend's house. I had like a decent spread, but PS2 was like my baby. Love the PS2.
Yeah, the PS2 is phenomenal. I still have a PS2 and I got a bunch of games for it. I love that console. I played the hell out of Need for Speed, Underground. I played the hell out of like Midnight Club. Some of the 2K games were on there as well. It was really big into that. But there's one game I want to bring up in particular that really I feel like it was kind of an underthrow, like an underthrow ball, kind of like a softball throw that was knocked out of the park, right? And that is Grand Theft Auto 3.
Oh God, I forgot to mention TT. Yes,
let's talk about that and where you were and how it felt to play a game of that nature. Because remember, before GTA 3, open world really wasn't like that.
No, but there were games that brushed against it that maybe don't get the recognition they deserve.
Let's talk about it. So what games are like that?
So before GTA 3, the first game that I remember it reminded me of was Driver 2 for PS1, where I remember playing Driver 2 for the first time. And then just like being so enamored with the idea of like, at least that at the time, that level of freedom of being able to just drive around and plow into things. And though you couldn't kill civilians, you could
remember the little things that would come up the
drawbridge or
the drawbridge, and you'd always try to ramp like I used to always try to ramp the drawbridge in driver games and whatnot.
It was like a very early example of like a systemic open world city. Even though it wasn't obviously nearly as advanced as what GTA 3 would do, but I remember I was like, I don't even want to play the game, whatever the missions. I just want to drive around and just do dumb stuff. So when GTA 3 came out, I never bought it. I played it at a friend in, this would have been middle school because GTA 3 was 2001. And I remember him letting me borrow it. And as the best friends do, they never asked for it back. And so over time, it became mine. And I still have that copy now.
Wow.
I still have it. And it was one of the first games, and still one of the
How did you make sure to pack it every time you needed to move?
I feel like we've all had those things, right? We're like, well,
you got
the
special
moment
box right here,
because this would have been 8th grade, so you're going from a middle school to high school, so you're making that leap to a different school, and that's kind of their expiration date. Like, if you don't catch me before I go to a whole different school, then and you don't have my phone number. So that's it, man. It's like, and then after a while, I forget that it's not mine, and then they never bring it up. So I mean, it's technically his fault, That's the story I'm sticking to.
Wah, wah, wah.
But yeah, GTA 3 was the first game I can ever remember being truly obsessed with. Like, there were plenty of games where like, oh, I love playing this and I want to play more of it. But that was like, I can't not go through life not thinking about this game when I'm not playing it. Like, I would go to school and I would just think about things I want to try to do in GTA 3 when I get home. Like, oh, what? Because it just seemed like anything was possible in that game, right? You're just like, there's so much you can do. It allows just this unprecedented level of freedom. Like, what if I, what if I stack up cars this way, or how many cars can I blow up at once with a rocket launcher? And and then once you got like a hold of the cheat codes, then it was like a whole other world of just.
I was just gonna ask if you were one of them brothers that had a piece of paper that you went to like Cheat Code Central or Cheat Planet or something
Oh
like
yeah,
that?
I was going to like back when they sold cheat code books. Whenever I would go to the grocery store with my mom, and I was like, I'm gonna go look at the book section. I would just like write them down, like you just go to the page and you just try to
Ah,
like I
dang,
would
that's
borrow like a piece of paper and a pen. It's just like I'm gonna jot
nasty
these
work.
down. It's not
I love
stealing.
it.
So,
It's not
I'm
stealing.
just copying information from this thing that I'm not gonna
I'm just
buy.
getting sources. I'm just getting sources.
Yeah, so yeah, that just opened a whole other world of just like nonsense. But yeah, GTA 3 was, I mean, like for everyone, it was like that watershed moment of, whoa, I didn't know video games could be this, and this is like all I want to do now.
No doubt. Were you one of the people, as like many, that turned that tank shooter backwards
Oh,
and took flight?
I probably tried it just because I remember just doing so much dumb stuff. I
Yes.
probably did at some point. That tank was such a power fantasy because you just get like 6 stars and you're just like plowing through police cars because they explode on impact for some reason. Your tank's made out of a weird explosive gel. I also remember spending way too much time trying to figure out how to pilot the dodo plane because that thing, and then realizing way too late that it's not really meant to fly the way you think it should.
No,
But
it's
you
not.
like convince yourself, like, no, I'm just doing it wrong. There's clearly, why would they put a plane here if you can't fly it, right? Like you try to fly across the bay, you see the skyline or the skybox of like what like another city. So you're like, oh, I bet I could get over there. And I'm just not trying hard enough. So I would spend just way too much time just like nose diving into the water and immediately dying and stuff.
No doubt, no doubt. All right, so GTA was a super special time that unlocked a lot of different other open worlds. Sure, there was others before it, but it was really a craze after GTA 3 came out because then you got like, you got your getaway game, Mafia started to come out.
True crime.
True Crime Streets of LA was a big deal. I forget there was one other one.
Simpsons
Oh,
Hit and Run,
Saints Row.
baby.
Saints Row.
Oh, I mean, yeah,
Saints
eventually,
Row
yeah.
Wait, Saints Row though did that didn't come out until 360 though, right?
Yeah, it was like if it wasn't launch title, it was launch year for sure. I remember seeing the first preview for Saints Row in a Game Informer, and it's like one of the early, like this is one of the first next gen games I've ever seen. You're like, whoa, look at those graphics, and stuff. Yeah, that early Saints Row, I think people that only know the series from like the third game and beyond, you forget how much that first game was just straight up a GTA clone, like both in style and just in its tone.
No doubt. I mean, it was, but it was. I felt like they took a push into the thug genre a little bit more than GTA. GTA felt like it almost felt like mafia-ish, like
It
mafia-based kind of
or more like kind of like
organized crime.
yeah, and also more like period pieces with each game. Like Vice City was basically, hey, we watched a lot of Scarface and Miami Vice, and we want to make one of those. And then San Andreas was like, hey, we watched a lot of like early '90s like
Boys in the
gangster
Hood
movies
like
and
that.
stuff. We want to make one. We like John Singleton a lot. Yeah, so yeah, I think Saints Row was a little bit less cinematic, I guess. And it was just more like you mentioned, like we just want to tell a story about the streets, but we're not really going for like paying homage to any specific like artistic film source in that way, I guess.
Right. Yeah, it was just it is just gritty.
Yeah.
It was
And
a
then
really
they eventually took a hard left from that.
dude, like they destroyed that series in my opinion. Like I'm not trying to hate on the Volition or anything like that, but it's just like if you look at like the first one and then you look at the last one, you're just like, what happened?
I actually like it. I because Saints Row the Third for me was the where Saints Row I felt found its identity. Because I was like, I don't think they can only like two started to get there. Like two's kind of like I think two is maybe the most interesting to go back to because it's like you can see the transition of like this is still bits of one, but it's a lot sillier than one too. But it hasn't gone way into the silliness that Saints Row the Third would be. I think I maybe because I don't think that series could ever out GTA. So I kind of appreciate it. Like, well, what can it do that can kind of carve its own space? And then with the third game, it was like, what if we just were just super stupid. Like, what if we just got like just super dumb, like even dumber than GTA, and just like really leaned into that? And I felt like the third specifically nailed that. It was just like, okay, like GTA is silly, but it's more satire,
Right.
and this is more like you're getting like a dildo bat and you're calling up Burt Reynolds, who's like the mayor of the town, and he's like a weird Final Fantasy summon that shows up and punches dudes with you. And it's like I kind of like that they're just like, you know what? Like if GTA is The Simpsons, then Saints Row the Third is Family Guy a bit, like in terms of like just the how absurdist it gets, you know?
It eventually turned into the Cleveland show. But
Yeah, eventually, you know, they did like, you know, Saints Row 4, I didn't quite hit as the same for me, and then the reboot was, it's, you know, it was what it was, but yeah.
were you a big fan of the reboot at all?
Not particularly. There was something nostalgic about it because it was so old school in its design of like, oh, this feels like a sandbox game of the 2000s. Like again, like you mentioned before, like that initial GTA craze where everyone was trying to be GTA. It felt like a game from that era in a way that was kind of charming. But once that charm wore off, it was like, okay, but yeah, this
Facts.
isn't quite what I want it to be. Like, there's nothing like wrong with it in turn. Like, it's not like I don't think it's like a bad game necessarily. Like, I've played some truly just like straight up broken and busted stuff. This is just sort of it doesn't have the same charm. Like it's trying, but it's not there. So yeah, it was a game that was like, this is fine, but I don't think I want to stick with this for however many dozen of hours it goes on for.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was like because I bought that game when it was like I'm gonna keep it a buck. I bought it when it was like $7 or like $10 or something like that. Because like I bought it pretty much like right when they kind of went out of business, and I was like, let me see what they were trying and see like kind of why it wasn't, you know, looked at as great. And I played it and I was just like, when I first initially turned it on, the driving was kind of nice. You know, the shooting was pretty good. But the story was just so like it just felt kind of just all over the place.
It almost felt like a less good Saints Row 2 because it wasn't. I mean, I felt like it wasn't quite as absurd as the games that came before, but it certainly was like stupid and silly. But it was also, it seemed like it was trying to be a little bit more grounded in a bit. So it's almost like, okay, maybe like almost like a Saints Row 2 sort of balance, but just not as consistently engaging or entertaining. Like I respect them trying something new because I after Saints Row 4, it was kind of like, what do you do? Like, where do you go? Because that game just got just so dumb, buddy. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you escalate further than that? Being superheroes and all that stuff outside of like, I don't know, you just become gods, like just literal gods at a certain point, and but also that you drive cars. So it's like a reboot kind of. I understood the mentality of a reboot in that sense. Like maybe you hit the reset button a bit, but yeah, just didn't quite hit the same way.
All right. So yeah, I mean I feel that. It just wasn't the best experience. But like let's go back because we're going all the way to, you know, current day. And what I wanted to just knock out of the park real quick is just to kind of like from pretty much PS3 onto current day. How did you kind of navigate your way through that? Where are you at currently? What do you really like about gaming that's going on today, and what do you kind of fear?
So the PS3 generation, you know, this is so I guess technically it started in 05 with the 360 launch. But again, I bought the PS3 again, keeping with the Sony trend. But this was also the time where I had my first job working as a bag boy at a grocery store. So I was like, oh, I can buy anything now. All right. So I felt like this is the first generation where I felt like I am an adult gamer now. I've graduated high school. I work. I have my own income. I can do the things I always said. I'm going to buy the other stuff, which was great because, you know, he had that freedom. And, you know, this is also like the sort of like I'd reached my peak of like not even just being a video game fan, but just paying a lot more attention to just the industry, you know? and like reading Game Informer and other magazines and talking to friends and learning more about just like, oh, here's what's coming out, here's what was announced, what, you know, following E3 news. So that, you know, and with that generation kind of being the start of what we would consider to be like modern games now, in terms of like online gaming becoming a lot more, you know, like pretty much becoming what it is now, and achievements and downloadable games becoming a thing, like digital games becoming a bigger thing, the indie market becoming established during that generation, which was its own epiphany of like, oh my god, the smaller downloadable experience can be just as good, if not better, than the big AAA stuff. Oh my, holy crap. Okay, you know, like when you know, Braid is often credited for the game that sort of broke that glass ceiling for the indie market of like, oh, this is fantastic. Can we? Is it? We can say that this is as good as, I don't know.
You don't need a crazy budget to get something good done.
Exactly. So you're like, oh, and then like, not that this wasn't always true, but just sort of and this lined up with my evolving taste that like games can come literally in all shapes and sizes and genres, and they can tell so many different kinds of stories. And like this was the beginning of me like really maturing in terms of appreciating games as an art and wanting to you know, now coinciding with my newfound financial independence, wanting to get my hands on everything because so much more was more readily available and many people were doing more interesting stuff now, and I wanted to see that stuff, you know.
Yeah, I got you. You got a little bit of that FOMO going on.
Exactly. And again, reading like Game Informer and you read previews and reviews, and you're like, oh, I've never heard of this, but this sounds cool. I want to play that. What is this game? Super Meat Boy and Limbo and all this like smaller stuff. Like, I want to play that stuff. That seems cool. And then again, some stuff was only on certain platforms. So I was like, oh, I want everything. I don't want to miss out. So, you know, I bought a Wii, I bought a 360. I had a PSP too at the time. It got a DS. Like the only thing I didn't have was a gaming PC, but like I had all the handhelds and I had all the consoles. Like I am not missing anything ever because I've never been a console fanboy. I stuck with PlayStation because it was my preferred because I can only have one. But like I would never defend it with my life the way a lot of players tend to do for some reason. Of like, this console is my identity for some reason. I would always look at games that were exclusive to another platform kind of with envy and not like, oh, well, I don't need that because, you know, PlayStation's number one. It's like, oh man, I wish I could play that because that looks cool. Like I remember when Wind Waker came out and I was like, oh, that looks so cool, but I don't have a GameCube. I was like, man, when I get a GameCube, I'm gonna play Wind Waker. You'll see, I want to play it. And the same with like KOTOR when that came out, because that was an Xbox exclusive. And I was like, oh my god, I love Star Wars. This seems like the best Star Wars game ever, and I can't play it. So that was like my mission, was to become like, I want to see everything. I want to experience everything this industry has to offer. So this is my time. So I think that was like the PS3, 360, Wii generation was like my first step into what I would like being a true video game, I guess, enthusiast, or I guess enthusiast. Yep. Yeah.
No, that makes complete sense because you got to it wasn't you like depending on like moms or like anything like that. It was like you actually like doing your own personal research, looking into certain things, saying, I want that. I got my home console, but you know, they ain't got that over there. So I'm gonna hop over into this aisle and cop this game, and oh snap, this other console I'm gonna go cop that too. So like you were able to actually like weigh out decisions, make things that work best for you, and keep it pushing.
Yeah, and then you also realize that you suddenly know more than your friends. And you like, at a certain point, I became like the main sort of like tastemaker almost, and would be like the guy giving out recommendations to friends for things that they had never heard of. Because my friends time, like, they loved video games, but they were a little bit more casual, I guess, you know, right? Whereas I was reading like magazines and like taught and trying all these different things that I would, you know, especially for the indie scene, because it was, you know, still in its infancy. I would tell my friends like, hey, have you heard of this game? Like, I don't know, Super Stardust HD. It's really good. Or again, like like Braid or Limbo at the time, and just like no, like you guys got to try these ones, like the smaller stuff. Castle Crashers was a big one that eventually became a hit. It's like, yeah, like these, and they're cheaper too. They're like $10-15, and they're just as good as the big stuff. You don't have to wait for the big stuff to come out. This is great. And then so it was like, and I think that was also where I kind of got my first taste of what would lead to my career of like, oh, like talking about games in a more critical and almost like preview-esque way, of
Mhm.
like telling my friends about like, hey, here's a game that you haven't heard of. Let me tell you all about it. And here's like I played it. Here's what I think of it. And then realizing how much I enjoyed doing that of like, oh, it's cool to bring attention to smaller stuff or just to games in general and talk about them in a more like critical way.
Yeah. So, I mean, you kind of helped me with this part just by saying what you just said right now. But now I'm kind of curious because now you're kind of formulating, kind of a direction, in my opinion, based on where you're at right now. Right.
Mm.
So you were getting all these different games. You started liking a little bit of everything, right? You're like, oh yeah, it's PlayStation, that's the home, but man, the Xbox, that got something I like on there. I want to go play Blue Dragon, or I want to hop over to Nintendo and play that new Mario Galaxy, or something like that. At what point were you like, you know what? I'm so deep into gaming. I'm gonna throw out some applications and see what happens.
So it's weird. I always again, in hindsight, I always wonder why it took me as long as it did. But like for Game Informer specifically, I was subscribed to the magazine since 2000. I want to say so, a long time. Getting it every month, reading previews, getting to know the staff, some of which would become my eventual coworkers because they were still there. And then just getting all of that like insight and knowledge into like this is how the game industry works and here's what's coming out, and doing that for so long, I always had it in my mind like that seems like a cool job, but I never consciously thought that I could do that, because I think it's like it was never clear how do you do that? Like where do you go to school to learn how to do that
Bro,
job?
talk about it,
It,
man. Like, I feel like there were so many of us that wanted to get into gaming so bad, but we're just like,
What about games media, right? You're like, I want to do what they do, but how?
yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
and,
that's still kind of a question to this day.
Yeah, like I think it's easier than ever, and the road is more clear just because of the internet and like knowledge. But even back in the late 2000s, early 2010s, it was still like a very nebulous sort of. It wasn't as clear as like, oh, I want to become a lawyer or a doctor, right? Like, oh, you go to law school or medical school if you want to do that. But like for writing, I was like, do I need to go to journalism school? Is that required? Do I need to, So how do I prove that I know about video games and I'm good at video games? Do I need to, study video games somehow? And so when I graduated high school, I had that little crisis of like, I don't know what I want to do. I knew everything I don't want to do, right?
Right.
Because I was always big on like, and I still am now, where like I don't want to just work somewhere for money because I've never just been that kind of person. Doesn't really do much for me because I was like, I'd rather do something I love and have that sort of like personal fulfillment. And I knew that like, well, video games I'm passionate about. And initially I thought like, well, I guess maybe I'll go make video games because that's the only thing I could think of in video games. So then I wound up eventually going to school to study game design. Like I went to the Art Institute because they had a game design program to be in Fort Lauderdale in Florida. And so I did like bachelor's program there, learned how to make games. Which I still value now because it's like I'm probably one of the few games writers that has actually made a game from start to finish. So you kind of get that.
Congrats.
And you get that appreciation
right
for
there.
it.
That's what's up, man. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big feat. That's always on the resume.
And I think it also just it serves me. It has served me well as from a critical lens, because I feel like you never really appreciate how something is made until you do it. Because you see, it always annoys me when you see people be like, "Oh, look at these lazy developers. They didn't fix this thing," or even just the term "lazy developers." It's like, no, man. Like, making a game is one of the hardest things you can do, because it combines so many disciplines into one thing. Like, it's harder than making films or TV, because it's a combination of technical and artistry, and so many things have to come together in a way. Like, even the best games ever made were on fire for most of their development.
What was your specific role in creating a video game? If
So
you
when
don't mind me asking.
Yeah, well, in school, you learn a bit of everything, right? Because then it helps you sort of narrow down what part of the process
Yeah, it
do I
makes you
like the
versatile,
most,
right?
you know. So it's like I did the artist side, like learned animation, modeling, character rigging, texturing, uh, programming, which I was garbage at and failed twice, which programming's hard. And eventually, I settled on like, oh, I really like environmental design. Like, I love creating spaces, because especially that generation when technology got to the point where people were making like really nice lived-in spaces. Like, I remember Uncharted was one of my early inspirations. Was like I love like exploring the worlds of Uncharted and just seeing the level design and going like, wow, that looks cool. So I was never really big into characters. It just wasn't my thing, and I also wasn't super great at it. But I love making a box look like a box and making it look dirty. And then I don't know, I don't know, maybe I'll put a rag on it, and maybe that says something about like, why is that rag there? I don't know. Maybe a mechanic was here and he wiped his face and left it there. Maybe that tells a little bit of a story. Fill your own blanks, but I
So
like
you
that
like
part.
creating a little bit of story within the actual items within the game.
Yeah, like, you tell me, make me a room. I'm like, yeah, okay, sounds fun. I'll do that.
Now, since since you're technically a developer as well,
I wouldn't go that far.
I mean,
I was I,
you
I
developed,
learned how to do it, but I haven't
you
shipped
worked
anything.
on the game. Did said game come out?
No. This would be like a school project, because you had to make a game to graduate. Like, the
Oh,
final
okay.
project, you had 1 year with the team to, from start to finish, from concept to playable build, make something. So I've done that with the team, where like we started with nothing, and then you gotta assign roles, and I was a team leader, and the game didn't have to be good necessarily; it just had to work.
Work. It had to function.
Yeah, like, which is really more important. Like, can you get something that works and doesn't fall apart? And if it's fun, that's a bonus, but nobody expects it to be fun because we're students, right? So
So, what does a person like you think when a game comes out and it's just like broken as hell? And it's like not one thing, but it's like an assortment of issues. Like,
uh
what's your first thought that comes out of your mind as a writer?
uh that's unfortunate. It's probably like that tone. Again, I think there,
Okay.
because there's again, a lot of people have the knee jerky thing of, oh, the developer was lazy and they're trying to take your money, and it's that very, like, very harsh reaction to it. And I understand it, because at the end of the day, you spent money on a thing that it should work at launch, absolutely. But there's a million and one reasons why games come out. No, I think the thing to remember is that no one sets out to make a bad game, right?
Right.
And there's so many reasons why games don't quite hit the mark, whether it's a lack of funding, a lack of time, a lack of expertise, maybe biting off a little bit more than the studio could chew, like over ambition sometimes. The thing to always keep in mind for people is that if you think a game is bad, I guarantee you the studio already knows that. Like, no studio
Mm.
releases a game thinking, oh, we nailed this, when they know it's like awful. Like, they are as aware, and they're just sort of like, at a certain point, you have a deadline, right? Like, you just run out of time, and not every developer has the luxury of either getting to delay it, or to even just sort of like set their own sort of like release cadence, because some are at the mercy of publishers, and publishers have shareholders, shareholders have financial quarters that need to be filled with something. It's a story that has unfolded a million times, of like, this game probably shouldn't have come out, but it needed to hit quarter two of this year. They needed something on the books, so ready or not, here it comes. And the studio is like, and a lot of times it's out of the studio's hands, right? It's just like the people above said, you're putting this out now. And you're like, well, we'd really like another 6 months. Well, patch it later. You know, we need this out now. So like,
told me that 6 months ago.
I cannot tell you the number of times I've talked to developers that are keenly aware of like a game's issues, and they're just like, you know, when it's like just the rank and file employees that have no say in the decision making process, they know. They know that they're putting out something that they're like, well,
here's kind of a question based off of that answer that you gave me. I'm wondering now, do you think that today we have more games that come out partially broken than we did when we grew up?
I'd say, that's hard to say. I'd say it's more likely to be more just because developers now have the safety net of post-launch patches, right? So a game doesn't necessarily have to be all the way there at launch. Like even if it's a day one patch, you can just like you can still patch it that day, but it doesn't have to be ready outside the box. It's sort of the double-edged sword, right? Because when you know, prior to, I guess we'll say, games being connected to the internet, a game had to be good at launch because it was going like games were permanent back then, right? Like if a game had a bug in it, it was just a bug forever. It could not be fixed, which sucked. Like, because there were certainly games that came out back then that were broken or had some sort of glitch that, you know, eventually you had to just publicize it a bit, and it became just sort of aware through word of mouth of like, hey, if you do this one thing in this one spot, it's going to break the game, so don't do it because there's no way to fix it because that's just not how video games work just yet. So like the advent of like post-launch support has been a gift and a curse, because it's a gift in that, oh, games don't have to be permanently broken anymore. Like if something's wrong, they can just get in there and fix it. And it's like, that's great, you know? But then on the flip side, like I mentioned, especially just sort of for either decision makers that maybe abuse that too much and say, you know, they're like, we'll fix it in post, that kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, but people are buying it now. So it should really be at least 90% of the way there, you know?
Do you think that's more like, and this is just a general question, do you feel like sometimes the publisher or maybe the development team purposely kind of gives them less time than they probably should have to complete something in hopes that they'll just, you know, overtime's approved, whatever, just get it done and yada yada yada, and like because it seems like more often than not, there's always and you know, there's never going to be a game that's just flat out perfect in every single way. Because I mean, for myself, I've been playing Star Wars Outlaws. It's run smooth as hell, but there's been a few moments where I was like, I know that ain't supposed to be happening right now. Like you know, like I'd go to swing and my punch would go right through them, and like it wouldn't like hit detect. And then I realized like that's not even somebody I'm supposed to be fighting, but why are they able to alert the entire building that I'm here if I can't hit them? Like so there's some weirdness to it, but I just got to ask, like, do you think that like any of this is like made to like put some oomph in their, you know, team to like, yo, I believe you guys can bust this out now. Hurry up and get this done. You guys got a couple years or whatnot.
I mean, I guess you know, in terms of timetable, it's always relative to what the project is, like the scope. Like,
sure.
So you said a couple of years, so like 2 years to make something like Star Wars Outlaws is nowhere near enough time. So that would be, or if I was on that team and my boss said you have 2 years to make an open world Star Wars scoundrel game, I'd be like, are you out of your mind? Are you trying to kill us? But in general, like, you know, like like establishing the finish line for a game, like is the question sort of like, do you think they put did they intentionally give them less time than they need to try to, I don't know, spur them to get it done? I feel like
I'm kind of asking that because it seems that more often than not, there's always a day one patch. There's always, you know, we'll get to that. And it's like sometimes these things are like, wow, like how is that an issue right now? Like the game is out. How is this like something particular? Like we just heard about, to keep it on the same subject, Star Wars Outlaw. Like for the PlayStation 5, you know, there's an update that can make you restart the entire game.
oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that's not great.
Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, I think that you know, obviously I can't speak for everyone, but like I'm sure there's certainly those like publishers or just decision makers in general that absolutely have that in their mind when they're deciding like a launch window of, well, we can fix it in post, because you know, I mean, that's always an option, right? Like that's always an option that's available to everyone. And I guess it just depends on like how much do they care about
Ooh.
like early reception, because everyone cares about early reception. Like, you know, nobody wants to, nobody, again, no one sets out to make a bad
Concord.
game, and nobody wants to be the game that becomes the meme, right? Like meme fodder of like, oh, look at this disaster at launch. You know, Cyberpunk went through that. So many other games have gone.
Concord's currently going through that right now.
Yeah, Concord feels like its own. Honestly, Concord's an interesting thing because I feel like that game's fine. It's just sort of suffering from a different sort of backlash, but we can talk about that in a bit. But like, I think sometimes like I don't even think those decisions are made from like, I don't want to say like a malicious sort of intent. I think sometimes people really do think that they can get a game done in what is actually a short amount of time. And like it's like they overestimate, or rather they underestimate the time that it's going to take. Because you know, everything looks easier on paper until you start doing it, right? Like even if you
Sure.
have the money and the expertise, depending on the scope of the project and your ambition, it always looks easier, which is why it's so important to have someone or people that have realistic visions and expectations. So like someone could be totally well-meaning and say like, yeah, we could probably get this done in 4 years. Yeah, I think. And then, you know, things change all the time in development, you know, right? Visions change, ideas change and evolve, budgets change. And so like there's so many just X factors that always get involved. People leave, you know, someone that might have been important to the team decides to leave for whatever reason. I feel like you have to, maybe sometimes that's a failure of accounting for those sort of like inevitable road bumps that come that just are part of the development cycle, you know? And maybe then getting surprised when they happen when you probably shouldn't, because that's just how game development is. Like it's even the smoothest games are just a roller coaster of just changes and whatnot. But like I think ultimately every developer has to always, and I like to think they do always shoot for like, if possible, have this be the most polished thing out of the box as we can. But again, even if the developer has that intent, that doesn't always mean if they have a big publisher or just funding source behind it that they will allow them to do that, right? Like if they could go to them saying like, "Hey, we would like 6 more months to get this out the door." It's like, well, we need this now. And at the end of the day, they have the final say, right? Because they are the pocketbook.
Right.
So then all you can do is sort of like go to your team and say, well, guys, we got to buckle in and really dial in and try to get what we think would take 6 months to do. We need to get it done in like 2. And that's where crunch can rear its head and all that stuff. And sometimes they can make it work. Like I've heard stories of critically acclaimed games from developers that they say like this, just so you know, this game was on fire till literally the last minute. Like we were convinced this was not going to come out and be as well received as it was.
It's crazy how that kind of stuff works. Where I mean, we've heard about it with like past Bungie games, like with like certain Halo titles, how it was just like they didn't think they were going to get it done, and somehow it's like a miracle happened, and we got Halo 3 like on time and stuff like that.
I mean, I think that if anyone is ever curious about what the game dev cycle looks like. I mean, I think Double Fine Adventure is one of the best looks at just the game development like one of the rawest and most honest looks at it. If you watched it, but is the making of a Broken Age, Double Fine's Broken Age from a few years ago, like that they had a
I know
documentary
Tim
team.
Schafer does a lot of like sit downs and talks and like he doesn't he has no problem showing stuff off.
Yeah, and maybe to even his detriment, because not everything paints him in the best light, but at least he's honest, right? And he did it again with Psychonauts 2 with the Psych Odyssey documentary from a couple years ago, where like, if you want to just a look at like just the ups and downs that can occur in a game development, like just the episodes where it shows like, hey, we ran out of money. What do we do?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and again, like him having to have these meetings and just seeing his wild ideas and then having to scale back either because it's like, Tim, we can't do this, or we don't have the money to do this, and then having to adjust. And there's so many times you're like, I don't know if this game's ever going to see the light of day. And then both of those games came out and were well received. And you're like, it didn't seem like it would make it when you watch those episodes, but I think like I think No Clip also does some great stuff. You watch like the making of Hades that they did, where they did a similar approach where that game documented the entire development cycle of Hades, going into early access. And it's Supergiant Games, a fantastic studio with a great track record, and even just seeing their sort of like trials and tribulations for a comparatively smaller game too. But I think when you watch those, you sort of get a lot more appreciation and understanding for just it's such.
It almost forces you to be less mad.
I don't say be less mad. Like everyone has the right to be angry, because at the end of the day, you paid $70 for a thing that maybe is on fire and it really shouldn't be, right? Because I think my old coworker Jeff Cork used to always say, when it comes to like, oh, why isn't this game working, or X, Y, and Z? It's like, oh, I understand why, but at the end of the day, that's not my problem. Like, it's not the customer's problem.
You're right. I mean, you sit there, you get your burger from McDonald's and you're like, what the hell is going on here? And then you go inside and you notice there's only 2 people working and there's a line around the building and you're like, oh, I feel bad. And then you're like, wait a second, why do I feel bad? This isn't my problem. Like, why isn't my food right?
Yeah, or you can feel bad. Like, again, it's like both things can be true of like, oh, I understand, but I still paid money for. I should still get what I need. Like, I get why it didn't come out, but it doesn't mean I suddenly don't want what I wanted, right? I still want the thing that I ordered. So yeah, it's I guess it's a crapshoot so much in video games. Like it is chaos most development cycles. It's like, oh, but you try to keep it a controlled chaos, right?
No doubt. All right, so I got a few other questions. We're going to be working our way out of the show. We're working our way towards the end right now. But I definitely have a few other questions, especially pertaining to you and like, Game Informer and then the current stuff that you're working on right now. I've seen recently, and we talked about it a little bit in the green room before the show, that you had your final time having a badge that says Game Informer on it from when you went to Gamescom out in Germany, right?
Yeah, the Gamescom mug here. I got from
Capcom. Phenomenal. So tell me about the experience of walking into like a Gamescom and being in I'm not sure if you had plenty of other gigs already or if that was kind of a transitional moment for me. For you. Take me on a ride.
Yeah, so that had been set up when I was still at GI. Like I had a Gamescom's PR had reached out saying, hey, we'd like to, fly an editor out to do stuff. So like all of that stuff had been booked, like hotel, flight. I had booked all of my appointments for stuff I was going to see. Like pretty much it was all ready to go. I was just waiting for it to happen. And then, the shutdown happened. And so I still wanted to go because Gamescom, it was my first Gamescom, and it was the last like big convention that I'd never been to. Like I'd done multiple E3s and PAXs and Tokyo Game Show and stuff, but it's like, oh, Gamescom, I've never been to one of those, and that's one of the big ones. So I volunteered to go this time, And so when everything that happened, I was like, well, I'm not going to lose my chance to go to Gamescom. So I reached, I'm like, it's like the Denzel
Plane's
Washington
ticket's
meme.
still good.
Yeah, it's like, I'm leaving here with something. So I had to reach out to my contact, and they understood because everyone in the industry knew what happened and was bummed about it. So I basically just said like, hey, can I just still go just as I guess it's technically now as a freelancer? And she was like, yeah, of course. And then I just reached out to each of my
That's
uh
amazing.
appointment contacts, and they all had the same answer of like, yeah, we'll hold your appointment. You can still come see our thing. So that was it. So shout out to everyone that helped me out with that. And yeah, it was my first work trip as a freelancer in a very long time. So it was like, oh, okay, like this is weird to not technically have work in the sense that I lined up a couple freelance pieces while I was there. Like I did a couple things for Polygon that has already gone up. And then I was also serving as like MinMax's Gamescom correspondent for their podcast. I was going to talk about everything on the show about what I saw, but it wasn't nearly the same amount of work if I would have been a GI of like, okay, I have like multiple previews I have to write for everything that I saw, and maybe double previews because we got to do the magazine version and then the online version. It was kind of a little bit more laid back than I was used to, which felt weird. But and especially when I'm hanging out with my fellow industry friends, and it's like, oh, they're busier than me because they have like jobs. So it was an interesting experience, but it was nice for just being around the positivity that of games. Like I always loved going to conventions as a games media writer because it always recharged the enthusiasm for games, because it's like you're around, like one, you get to see your friends. Like working in media, there's so many people that you only interact with online, and same with the like PR people too. You only interact through Twitter or email, and then you only see each other at events like this, and that's always fun, right? And then you're also
Right.
meeting
You
people
can
for the
actually
first
go get
time.
drinks and kick it and have dinner.
Yeah, go to the
Yeah, I mean, I
JW
went to
Marriott.
PAX East. I went to this last PAX East. I flew out there. It was a little bit of a ride, but it was a good time. I got to meet a bunch of people that I usually talk to online. Very similar to what you have, except
Yeah.
I'm not technically in the business per se. I'm just kind of doing content creating and stuff like that. But like it was really cool being able to sit down, have dinner, kick it with people, see people that you only talk to hundreds of miles away
Yeah,
through a video
you just know
camera
them
or
as an
something like that.
avatar,
Right.
and then
Right.
you
They
go up
might
to them, and
join
you're
your
like,
party
"Wow,
chat or something every once in a while, but for the most part, you don't really know how they're doing or see how they're doing or anything like that until you go to an actual event. And it's pretty magical. Like it was my first time actually going to an event as a content creator and
Mhm.
meeting people and stuff like that. And I totally see what you're saying. It's really cool.
Yeah." To me, it's maybe arguably the thing I look forward to the most. It's just like, you message your friends like, "Hey, are you going to this?" Like, "Oh, let's," like you said, "let's grab dinner," or like, let's try to say hi to each other on the show floor, like, or do you have the same appointment I am? Well, will I see you there? That kind of stuff. So like that was like a good sort of like support system, I guess, because everybody was, like very sorry about what happened, and asking if I was okay and all that good stuff.
Did
Same with
that get
like,
old at all?
no, I understood it. It just became like, I wouldn't say funny, but it was like amusing because like since my name badge said Game Informer, like every time someone saw me that knew me or knew of me or knew Game Informer, it was always like this conversation would often start with, "Oh man, I'm so sorry." Like it was like, when you have like a death in the family and everybody knows
Right.
it, and the first thing like, "Hey man, I'm sorry about what happened. I hope you're doing okay," that kind of
I've
thing.
seen what happened to you.
Especially with PR people that I've worked with at Game Informer, because several of them were there. So it's like meeting people that I had worked on with cover stories that I've written, or just other features that are just like sad and also angry at GameStop and venting in front of me about everything that happened and stuff like that. Because at the end, it's not just the readers, but a lot of industry people are just as upset about how everything went down, because a lot of them have worked with GI forever, years and decades even. So it's like they have the same sort of like not only professional but emotional attachment to it too. So it's like, I guess we were kind of like grieving together which is, it's always easier than grieving by yourself sometimes, But yeah, it was fun. Got to, play a bunch of cool games and, get the full Gamescom experience, hang out in Cologne, Germany for a week, pretty much that I was there. So that is the one thing I appreciate about Game Informer is the travel stuff. So it's like, oh, this is like my last big trip under the banner. So let's make it count. Let's go out and have fun and also get some networking in,
No doubt. So obviously while you were at Gamescom, there were some interesting announcements, and there's been some interesting announcements throughout the year, this year, right? And by interesting, I mean like, what the fuck? Right? So like in particular, at Gamescom, there was the announcement, Indiana Jones coming to PlayStation 5, right? That was a big deal earlier this year. There's been, Lego Horizon going to Nintendo, and it's like, the hell is happening over here? There's been a lot of chumminess, I feel like, in the game industry where we usually seen them as like pure rivals that would never work together, right? Like we all envisioned, oh man, since that thing that happened with PlayStation and Nintendo and what was it? I don't believe it was JVC. It was like, what was it, Panasonic or I don't remember. But instead of teaming up with Sony, they teamed up with somebody else, and it kind of like ruined their relationship. And we're like, they're never gonna recover from this. And now we see, Horizon going on to Switch,
Sure.
and it's kind of weird. And we see, this is how you share your games, like from PlayStation and whatnot. And then we see Xbox games, this is how we share. We just put it on your fucking platform. How do you feel about the way today's kind of moving and where it's kind of like, I wouldn't say it's kumbaya by any means, right? Because I still feel like these are companies that are, they want to see themselves doing better than the other, but if they can use the other person to, kind of leverage themselves, they will do that. What do you kind of think about this whole kind of, everyone's kind of meeting at PC, but these specific deals with these certain games, we might, come together and share. What do you think about that stuff?
I mean, I think it's sort of an example that games have become, especially like mainly like big AAA games, have become so expensive that the platform holders can't afford to keep it on just their platform to recoup that money. Like you're hearing more and more stories about like even a game that sells really well, like a console exclusive that sells well, maybe it still isn't like enough for whatever their projections were or
We've seen
expectations.
that new Final Fantasy Rebirth come out this year. It's supposed to be a top tier game, right? And Square Enix is like, we need to rethink some things.
Yeah, to be fair, Square Enix is always financially disappointed with something. There may be an exception where I was like, I don't know what you guys expect, honestly, because it seems like especially back when they would say all their Western studios were like missing the mark, like Tomb Raider, and it's just like it sold pretty well for.
They were mad at Outriders. Remember that
a Tomb Raider game to sell. I don't know if you expected like Fortnite numbers for a Tomb Raider game. That's on you.
Single player experience. That's great.
Yeah, so they might have some skewed expectations, but in general, you see reports now about like the console scene isn't growing the way it used to with the newer generation, like younger gamers gravitating more towards PC and not buying consoles as much, and that's that goes across the board. So how do you adapt to that, and how much more sustainable is it to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on your big single like prestige, in the case of say a Sony exclusive, right? Like they have almost like the prestige television style of like first person single player experiences that take forever to come out because games are taking longer to make the bigger they are. So how do you recoup all that money? Does it still makes sense to only keep it in on your platform, even if that's what you have always done? Does that still just make sense? And are you just doing that just because it's just what we've always done? Or do you have to start thinking a little bit more outside the box, and by that I mean outside of your console box. So you see Sony now exploring that with PC, right? Or like now
Right.
they're, you know, they'll release their big first party single player stuff on PC a year or two later, but now their live service games will be day and date with PC. Like Concord is the first one of those. You mentioned before Xbox now being a little bit more, or a lot of bit more open about, hey, we'll just bring over some of our like, you know, third party exclusives to, or first party, I guess technically, because they own all those studios. Let's start moving those over to PlayStation and make some more money. Which, you know, Xbox is in its own, you know, situation right now because it's, you know, it's in last place, relatively, you know, definitively. So what do you, how do you keep making that money if infinite growth is the goal, which is sort of just the goal of capitalism, right? It's infinite growth,
Right.
which is inherently flawed in itself because it's like, well, how do you keep growing?
Yeah, that
Uh,
idea of year over year is sometimes like you're setting yourself up for failure sometimes.
yeah, because it's like even if you're doing well, if it's still not better than last year, you're like, well, what do you want from me, man? But I guess we'll put Indiana Jones on PlayStation. I don't know. So yeah, I think it's just more of a sign of the sustainability problem that sort of persists with the AAA market. Like this sort of cycle of, again, taking 6 to 8 years and hundreds of $1 million to make a game is not sustainable long term. And you know, it's been talked about ad nauseum from
Especially
other.
if you're chasing an old trend or something like that, or a trend that's like on this, or a trend that's kind of solidified itself with, people are happy playing this and they're not really looking to, hop on something new. Or
Mm.
I don't know. I just think there's a lot of different variables I feel that comes with making a game and then sustaining this is still popular now that we're done with the game.
Yeah, like I mean, that's always the dangerous thing is like if a game comes out and is, you know, catches lightning in a bottle with some idea, then naturally everyone else, especially again, decision makers, shareholders, money people, will go to the studio and be like, we want one of those. We need a Fortnite. We need a
In a lot
Destiny.
of Souls games right now, right?
Yeah, and I don't think those hit quite the same way, but like, yeah, it's like, oh, this is popular. We need one of those. And again, the risk with that is by the time you get one of those out the door, will it still be popular? Is this a fad or is this like does this actually have staying power? This like, new mechanic or genre or subgenre. We're seeing that now, or we have been seeing the last few years with like live service, sort of like, games like Fortnite, Destiny, like not even necessarily battle royales, but let's just say live service, just like the model in general. And going back to, I guess, Concord, as we alluded to before, of like hero shooters, of like, Overwatch came out, God, 8 years ago now. Uh, was lightning in a bottle, great game. Was clearly scratched an itch that nobody knew people had, and then years later, someone else attempting to do that style of game, and
Paladins.
others too. Yeah, other games
Yeah.
trying to do the same thing and maybe not always hitting the mark. And some of it's like it's just either just isn't as good, or it maybe at a certain point the problem with live service games is that most people only have room in their lives for one or two of them, right?
Right.
Like everyone, like it was like, oh, I love playing like single player or just games that you can actually finish. But you have your one, like, this is my comfort food. This is the game I go back to. This is the game I play with friends. Like whether it's like all my friends play Fortnite, this is just how we hang out, right? This is how we socialize. This is our watering hole. Some people it's Destiny, some people it's Apex, but you probably only have at most two of those because realistically, to keep up with everything in terms of like, oh, I got to keep up with the season pass and the battle pass and all that, you kind of only manage one or two of them. If you're that kind of dedicated player and also juggling just real life stuff. So the problem with any new one of those games, regardless of how good they might be, is that you have to argue to people that are already embedded in their living game of choice to, hey, you don't need to play that anymore. Come over to ours. All that time and potentially money that you've invested into this game, you need to ditch that and come play my new thing. That's a very hard argument to make, especially again when you have the social component where like I might like it, but all my friends are still playing Destiny, you know?
Right.
So how do I get them to play this? And if it's free to play, it's a little bit easier. If it's something like Concord, which is a $40 thing, which I actually respect because like people forget Overwatch 1 was a paid thing. Like it was $40. And I personally think it was better for it because then it wasn't really proliferated with sort of the live service, like we need your money stuff as
Sure.
much as Overwatch 2 is. But again, once you've kind of made your home in those kind of games, a Final Fantasy 14, a Valorant, whatever it is, you got to be real good to pry someone away. And is there still, or how many people are left that haven't found their living game that are interested in having one to begin with? I would be terrified to try to be the person that's like, come up with we want a live service like game that's going to make us money all the time, make us one. You're like, okay, I'll try. Like, again, you could have a really good concept, but that's not enough.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, because like I ain't gonna sit here and bash Concord, and I've said this multiple times. I played the game in the beta, right? Because the beta, it was free to play, right? And it's wild that even in the free to play, it didn't have crazy numbers, but it had a lot more numbers than it does now. Like way more, like 10 times, maybe 20 times.
Sure.
Which is wild. But I played it and I was like, this looks good. The functionality of the game feels pretty good. It feels a little slow sometimes, but like the mechanics of like the buttons, everything, like it feels nice. The actual like special moves that you do are pretty cool ones and whatnot. But then you come back and you're like $40, bruh. And then I'm looking over and I'm like, there's Valorant, there's Paladins, if that's still kicking, which I think it is.
They have they are also kind of plagued by the cloud of Marvel Rivals on the horizon,
bro,
which is another game that is quite good but is also free to play.
Exactly. So it's just like it almost kind of felt like I don't know, they're playing into the old school because like if you think about it, like I'm going to compare these two right now. What's that game called? I call it Bubble Fight. But it's a game that came out in February for PlayStation by Square Enix.
Oh, Foam Stars.
Foam Stars, yeah. Foam Stars is like a knockoff of Splatoon, right?
Yeah, or in that vein for sure.
Splatoon is pay for, right? You have to pay for that game. It's not a free to play game on.
Yeah, that's a full price game.
Exactly, right? But I feel like the difference between Foam Stars and Splatoon is Splatoon has history of being a pay for game, and it came out during a time where paying for that game or an Overwatch or something like that was kind of normal, right? Like so then when they made a sequel,
the first I'm sorry, what's that? Was like the first Splatoon was what, like 2015? 2015?
It was back on the Wii U, yeah, right. So this is during a time where like free to play games weren't big like that.
No, I mean
it was very far and few between. It was like maybe PUBG.
What is it? Yeah, and this is, I mean, first Splatoon was pre all of that. Pre Overwatch, pre PUBG, all that stuff.
Fortnite was just.
Fortnite wasn't a thing yet.
They weren't even planning on it being like Fortnite was honestly an accident, in my opinion.
That was the time when I was wondering if Fortnite would have happened, because it had been announced years before as like the fort building thing. Like that was Game Informer's cover story way back in the day when it was still the original vision.
That's what I was looking forward to in that game, and then it became what it was, and I was like, I'm all set.
It's funny. That's a whole other thing. I think people forget how the Battle Royale thing came to be, because it was like, man, did you guys just straight up rip off PUBG? Like, you absolutely did, but somehow it worked for you.
Yeah,
but yeah, like it's like, to your point, Concord, like the sort of like the approach they took with it feels like something that would have worked 8 years ago, like when there was less there was just less of it, you know, like 2017-ish. And it feels like it's trying to do that now, but the problem is there's so many more options now, and a lot of them are free. And like I said, Concord, from what I played of it, I haven't played the finished version, but I played the betas, and I was like, oh, this is fine. This shooting feels pretty good. It looks nice, you know. It's got it, like I have no like notes about like, oh, this is awful. It's like, no, this is fine. This is fun. You know, if you like Overwatch, you'll probably have some fun with this. But I mean, ignoring those kind of like bad faith criticisms about the game that have unfortunately like fueled a lot of the discourse around it, it's one of those games where it's just okay. Like it is perfectly fine. But like just being aggressively fine, it kind of just isn't
The
enough
wrong genre to be fine in.
to again, now in a more competitive market, trying to convince your friends, hey, let's find a new multiplayer co-op thing that we can play together that is $40, you know, so not full price, but still you get shell out some money. And is it better than if you already enjoy these kind of hero shooters? Like if you're an Overwatch person, it's like, should you make the jump to Concord? I don't know. I mean, is it better than Overwatch or even Overwatch 2, I guess, at this point? I mean, I guess it depends what you're looking for. Probably not, honestly. But it's not like, again, it's not like a bad game by any means.
No, it's not a bad game.
It's totally respectable. It's just
a competition, bro. Like it just
and who knows? Like it's got what sounds like a slow start. I would hope that anyone that decides to make a game like this knows that it's often a marathon and not a sprint, and that you cannot go into it expecting to be an immediate hit. Like I think Helldivers 2 was an example of a game that came out and no one expected that game to be the hit that it is, right? It's like, oh, sequel to Helldivers, that's cool. And then it comes out and it's like the biggest game ever. You're like, whoa. Right. But it's like that's an anomaly, right? Like you shouldn't plan for that. You shouldn't be like, oh, well, Helldivers did it weekend. It's like, no.
Yeah, I really don't think they did, because I mean, my buddy said it the best. He's like, I think they went into it thinking, you know, we're excited to have 10,000 concurrent players, hopefully. And then when they had way more than that, they were just like, oh my God, what's happening here?
Yeah, like they had this scramble, like, oh, you know, people, which I mean, that's the happy problem to have, right?
Right.
But again, you can't, again, if you're smart, you don't look at that and say, like, well, we need to do that, or we should plan it, or we should expect that, right? It's like, no, again, sometimes lightning in a bottle happens, and you know, and Helldivers 2 is also a good game. Like it's not like it was luck. It's like they made something really compelling that clearly
it was so
spoke to a lot of people. Concord is such an interesting. I feel like that's going to be one of the more interesting stories to follow for the rest of the year. And even talking about now is just sort of I don't know if we say what went wrong with it, right? Because like, did anything go wrong, or was just people did they overestimate the appetite for something like it? You know,
I personally think that $40 price tag really just
probably didn't
made
help
people feel some type of way, especially seeing that there was possibly something even more interesting that was free within within the same showcase.
Marvel Rivals
is nuts to me. Like, why would you do that?
Again, they couldn't have planned for Marvel Rivals because you know, it just you don't know that that's going to happen around the time that you're releasing your thing. It reminds me of when Overwatch came out and Battleborn was coming out around the same time. Do you remember that? They were like,
what?
Battleborn. Remember that?
No, I do not.
So that was Gearbox's first-person MOBA. That was like of a similar ilk in terms of like, oh, hero inspired, like all these wacky different characters with different abilities, but it was more of a MOBA. Like it was literally like first person MOBA. But there was a time where everyone I think confused the two, because they're like, which one is Overwatch? Which one's Battleborn again? They're kind of similar at a glance, but I don't remember. And then Overwatch wound up sort of like, I don't even say they were like at war with each other, but you know, people just couldn't help comparing it. But you know, Overwatch came out, became the success that it was. Battleborn, not so much. And you asking, or you even saying like, what was that? It's kind of maybe a testament to the legacy of that game, regardless of how good or bad it might have actually been. It It just didn't hit the same way. And if we're going to Marvel Rivals Concord thing of like, oh, two pretty similar games, kind of sharing the same mind share right now of marketing. Whereas like Marvel Rivals has all the advantages over Concord in the sense that it's free to play and it's got a popular license. So like, regardless of like, you're probably more likely to try Marvel Rivals anyway. It's like, oh, it's free. That I can at least check it out. But then you're like, oh, I like Spider-Man. I'll play the thing with Spider-Man in it, right? I know these characters, so there's already that sense of
familiarity really hits.
Concord with a new IP, that's the harder sell. You're like, I don't feel attached to any of these characters yet. And Concord also going out of its way to front load a lot of its lore to try to get people in the door. It's pretty much trying to do what Overwatch didn't do up front of like, we're gonna have all these cutscenes and we have all this lore for these characters, and it felt like we are going to make you fall in love with these characters the way that everyone fell in love with Overwatch's cast. But it's sort of like, well, Overwatch's kind of like love was more organic, where like people played those games and just sort of like on their own were like, oh, I really like this world and this character, I want to know more about this. And then that's when Blizzard started making the shorts and all that stuff. But they kind of earned it they just made compelling characters that people just latched onto. Whereas Concord's kind of going the other way of like, no, we'll give you all that stuff up front. But it's like, yeah, but I don't really have a reason to care about the green dragon man looking guy. I don't know. It's like, and also maybe there's also the thing about it, maybe veering a little too close to Guardians of the Galaxy and that the vibe of those movies in a way where it's going to come off as less than, I don't think that did them any favors either, because then it's hard not to compare. Like, is this just like a less good Guardians of the Galaxy?
Damn. Yeah, no, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving on. We got like I'd like to say like 6 or 7 minutes left max.
I'm here all day, so I'm here as long as you want to talk.
Well, I mean, I appreciate you giving me the option of having that amount of time, but I do have a daughter and a family that I need to check on and make sure that they good to go. So yeah. Going forward a little bit, I got to ask you, like, with these three main platforms being PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo, I feel like they got a lot of new hardware that they're going to be sharing with us in the next year to year and a half. We're hearing a lot of stuff about, some sort of handheld from Microsoft, right? It's still very much a rumor still right now, right? I mean, they definitely have talked about it right in front of our faces, but they never really said this is coming. Right. Nintendo Switch 2. We already know that is in the works, to the point that Nintendo's like, we got a showcase coming. We ain't talking about this shit. Leave us alone.
Right.
It's third party. Leave us alone. And then PlayStation, they obviously got the Pro, which we got a little bit of picture, which I'll show it on the screen here in just a little bit once I find it. But the PlayStation 5 Pro is supposed to be coming out with a little bit more, and it's supposed to have more ray tracing, 10% more CPU and stuff like that. What's your excitement level for some of this new stuff to come out?
I mean, to go down the line, Switch 2, excitement level very high, because I think I love the Switch, and I'm very curious to see how Nintendo iterates on that. I'm sure it'll be a Switch in terms of what the functionality, like the hybrid console, because that's just, they struck gold with that. So there's no reason to not do that again, but with some new bells and whistles and hopefully more power behind it. So I'm very pumped for that. The PS5 Pro, I could not be less excited for it.
Damn, really? You're not excited for it at all?
No, because why? What is it? What need is it fulfilling outside of like it?
I think
runs
they're messing
better
up by not really telling us that. But at the same time, they haven't really officially announced it. Really.
No, they haven't, and so who knows? But like, when I think of what I want from the PS5 right now, it's not, oh man, I wish I had more power behind it. It's just like anything, more games, like, and will the PS5 Pro suddenly make the dev cycle shorter and more sustainable? Probably not.
Yeah, I was gonna say I doubt it. I mean, that's just, I mean,
so it's
you
like,
can't
what are
come out quicker because you still have to support the main is still the baseline, right? It's like Xbox in the Series S, right? You still gotta figure this out before you put them, before you put the whole game out. You can't just be like, hey, this is for pro only.
Yeah, and also like the PS5, it feels like it's only now just getting started because of the slow start it had because of the pandemic and how they were all so, PS5s were so hard to find for literal years. Like it feels like we only recently in the last year got to the point where you can go to a store and just buy a PS5 like a normal thing.
I know, and then when you got it, you're like, I got it. Now what?
Yeah, and it's like I'll play some, like we still have
There's
like
some
so
good
many
games though, for sure.
yeah, so it's like so many big games are still cross-platform because
Mm.
it's hard. One is hard to ignore just the sheer amount of PS4s out in the wild. I get it. So, but like it feels like developers are still just holding on to that teat of the last generation because it's
Big
because
money.
it goes and games are so much more expensive now. Going back to like why we have to start putting games on other platforms. Like, how do we make our money from this? Well, if you make it PS5 only, yes, you get to harness the full power of the console, but you will make less money because it's just a numbers game, right?
I
Like,
was confused, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was confused when they talked about Lego Horizon going to Switch, but they didn't have a PS4 port. And they could be working on one in the background, but I just felt like it was weird that they didn't announce that.
it is
Like,
weird, I guess. I would love
you
to
know what I'm
notice.
saying? Because there's no way this Lego game is able to run on a Switch.
I mean, I guess clearly, I mean, we'll see, but I mean, I
No,
guess
no, no, no. I'm
that's
saying
the
there's no way
goal.
it can
I
run on a
guess.
Switch and not a PS4. That's what I'm trying to say.
Sure. Yeah, I guess we'll see. But yeah, I would love to know the story of how that whole game came together because it's such a fascinating just the whole idea and just the rollout. But yeah, I guess like when the PS4 Pro came out, that made more sense in the way of like, oh, 4K TVs were on the rise, and we would like to take advantage of that. So let's make something that can output in 4K. What's the big technology thing now that where the current consoles aren't hitting? Because not even all like launch like big first party games can. Not all of them do 60 by default. There's
Right.
still performance options where you have to choose between better graphics versus better frame rate. I mean, that's one thing I would love the Pro to sort of eliminate. It's like, can we just, like PC where like you don't have to make that choice on PC? Like, can we get to the point where like I just want the game to run the best, basically? I don't want to have to choose what compromise I have to make in terms of like playing it. Like, if you can eliminate that, sure. But is that still enough to justify its existence or make me excited? Like, I gotta get a Pro day one. Not really. At the end of the day, software sells consoles. That's always the case, no matter what.
Would you rather have a game that comes out and tells you, hey, we're doing 30 FPS and it's because it runs really well? Or would you rather have a game that just says, hey, we got 60 FPS, but it doesn't run that well?
Well, yeah, I would rather give me the thing that's optimized. It's like if you're pushing it to where it pushes 60, but it's not optimized, then don't. Like, what's the point? Because then if it's running at 60 but still like falling apart at the seams, then it's like it negates the 60, right? So just give me, and I don't mind. I'm not like a frame rate snob anyway. Like, again, not growing up playing PC games, I couldn't even tell the difference. I can until like probably this generation when it became an option for consoles. Like, I have a game, like a legit gaming PC now. But like I can still play games in 30 and not feel like I need to tear my eyeballs out the ways other people seem to like freak out about.
Right.
And it's some games that honestly, some genres, it just makes more sense to do 30. Like, not everything needs to be at 60, especially if it's like I don't need my slow paced narrative adventure to run at 60 FPS. It's like, why? So
yeah, because you're not like in a competition like state of mind. You're just like kicking back, enjoying the game.
Yeah, exactly. Does Outer Wilds need to run at 60? I don't know, not really. Doesn't make the puzzles any better. So yeah, like software is just where it's at. So the PS5 Pro, I'm very just like, nah, I'm not. I don't have the appetite for it right now. And for the Xbox, I mean, that's more interesting, and and that feels more real just because, again, sort of the Switch effect, right? Like, that's right, a Steam Deck exists. The Steam Deck doesn't exist without the Switch because Nintendo found that like, hey, there is a market and an appetite for being able to take console games on the go in a way that, a traditional handheld doesn't do because it's like separate libraries, right? Nintendo unified those libraries. Microsoft is a computer company first and foremost, and the Steam Deck is just a portable computer. Like that's literally all it is. So
Right.
they have the expertise and probably like they look at that and go like, we can make one of those, especially with all the other Steam Deck competitors out there, like the ROG Ally and stuff.
Yep.
So
And Legion Go and stuff like that.
and,
GPD for the win. Yada yada.
and it fits their philosophy of the last generation of we want you in our ecosystem and we want you to be able to play Xbox games anywhere, right? Like that's been their thing. Like we don't care if you buy our console, we just want you in our ecosystem. So that's why Game Pass is on PC. That's why we're doing stuff with I guess Sony now, because like, oh, you can play an Xbox game anywhere. We're less sort of like hardware focused in that way. So the idea of like, yeah, you have a portable now where you can play, like that's the only place you can't really play Xbox games outside of like streaming to mobile phones. But like, oh yeah, like we want a device where you can take, Gears of War anywhere you go and not stream it, like natively.
That sounds phenomenal.
Yeah,
Give it to me.
And if they also, again, if they make it a computer to where you can install Steam on it too, so I guess you could kind of just have your cake and eat it too in that way, which if they were smart, they probably would do that. Like just make it it's an Xbox handheld, but also you can do a bunch of stuff to it.
Kind of like how Steam has like an like it has its main OS that you use, but then it has the desktop mode, so where you can just kind of do whatever the hell you want, man.
Yeah, I feels like if
Linux,
Microsoft was really thinking this through, they would ensure that it could do that, right? So yeah, I'd say that I guess if we're ranking them, I'm most excited for the Switch 2, and then an Xbox handheld, and then a PS5 Pro is last.
You didn't even say you were excited for it. God damn.
And also I'll put the rumored Xbox Pro that we saw that picture of in that leaked document that looked like a cylinder. Like that's you could put that with the Pro PS5. Like any Pro console, I'm just like, I don't need that, man. It's like I'm just like so ambivalent to it.
Fair enough. Now I got some quick hitter questions to get us up out of here. I just want to thank everybody that is still currently here. Make sure you guys hit that like button, share this sucker out, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe. I'm going to be trying to bring back more interviews more often. I've been doing some other stuff like streaming, me actually playing video games. I feel like sometimes a lot of people talk about the game, but they ain't never playing them. So I make sure to try to play some games on my channel, as well as having, panel guests and stuff like that on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. But yeah, I'm going to try to do more like interviews like we're doing right now on Thursdays, like I was doing prior. But as I said, I have a few quick hitter questions I want to hit you with before we get up out of here. The first one being, what's a gaming genre that Marcus does not like? Like, what's something that you're just like, I'll try it, but
probably MOBAs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a specific game like that you tried that you thought you would like, but it just didn't get you over the hurdle?
Oh, like in the MOBA genre?
Yeah.
I don't know if I say I thought I would like it, but the first one I played was League back when League started, because I had a roommate that was really into it, so I played with her and some friends. I was like, oh, I've heard this is like popular. I'll try this, and it was like, it's just fine, but like, I don't think this is for me. And I'm not the biggest multiplayer guy anyway. I'm a more single player game, so it takes a lot for a multiplayer game to really hook me. Like Overwatch was one of the few, but just a MOBA's sort of the worst because it's like, these things take forever to finish one round. You're in there for the long haul, and I don't know, it's a lot of doing the same stuff over and over. And I don't know, it's just, it sings for some people. For me, it's just like, I like after a while, I'm just like, I want this to be over.
It's never ending too. Right?
Exactly. And then also if you're playing by yourself, and certain communities are like not the best in terms of being nice to you, and you're getting yelled at by people constantly for not performing to whatever standards they have. So just like, I don't even like this when people are nice to me, let alone as some idiot freaking out over a video game.
No doubt. No, I feel that. Next question. What's the best 3 games that you played in the last year, regardless of it being new or not?
3 years. So from now to 2021, I guess.
No. Best 3 games that you played,
Oh, 3.
regardless of it being new or not.
Oh, ever? Or in the
Just
last year?
in the last year.
Okay. Let's see. I will say Tears of the Kingdom, which was my game of the year last year.
Okay.
I'll throw in Baldur's Gate 3. And this is tough. Especially 2023 was
Always hard on the third
was
one.
one of the best years ever. Was 2023. Like there was so much good stuff, and there's been a lot of good stuff this year too. You're really making me fight for this last one.
Everybody always fights for the last one. It's fun.
You know what? I'll pick something from this year. I'll throw out Shadow of the Erdtree, Elden Ring, because I reviewed it.
The
And,
DLC?
Yeah, phenomenal
Nice.
DLC. Yeah.
Okay, that's what's up. That's what's up. What is your favorite game studio of all time, and what game best represents it?
Man. You know what? I'll say Nintendo.
Okay.
And game best represents it. I mean, it's probably a Mario game. If I had to pick one specific one, maybe Mario Galaxy, in the sense of one of the strongest traits of Nintendo that they do better than anyone else is that they are so good at giving you things that you didn't know that you wanted. And I think Mario Galaxy was that. We're like, well, Mario is fantastic. How do you possibly make it even better? And then they were just like, what if you just rolled around in these spherical worlds and we just designed a game around that, which on paper sounds like weird. Of like, that's your next 3D Mario game? Like, you don't want like another Mario
super small planets, right?
Yeah, like not like a straight up just Mario 64 kind of game, but for Wii. And they're like, no. We're gonna do this motion control thing, and you're rolling around these big old balls, and you're gonna pretty much design the game around that core concept. And then it's, to me, the best 3D Mario game ever made. Like, I adore the Galaxy games. They are brilliant games. So, and again, I was like, I never asked for this. I didn't even think this was possible. And then you did it, and it's like, I love it. And they've done that countless times throughout all of their, series, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, good example of that. Of like, I don't know, what if we did an open world game but did it differently than everybody else? And Tears of the Kingdom, like, what if we just get you build stuff and just do whatever? And basically, we're encouraging you to break the game, but you're not actually, because we accounted for it. So yeah, Nintendo.
Mario Galaxy is the particular game that you're choosing for that one. All right. So then the next one would be, what game are you most excited for that's coming out in the near future? So I'd say within the next 6 months to a year, what game are you most excited for that's been announced?
Oh, man. Trying to think of everything that's coming out the rest of this year that's announced. I was like, I don't know, but maybe I just don't think about this as all things. You have your eye on so many different things. Indiana Jones looks cool.
It does.
And I'm a big indie fan in general.
Trying to crack that whip.
I just gotta crack the whip. What's 22? I mean, GTA 6. Hopefully that turns out well. Ooh.
A lot.
I know there's a lot. I'm trying to think of what am I like most excited for? I mean, that Metal Gear remake.
There's Metroid Prime as well. Don't forget about that.
Oh, actually, that is pretty high up. I'm a big Metroid Prime fan. Maybe that's the answer.
Just had to make sure to throw in a Nintendo game.
Oh, you know what? For this year, I will give it to Echoes of Wisdom, Zelda. I'm really excited for that. That looks. I'm in the mood for a new 2D Zelda, and for them again, they didn't just make another 2D Zelda. They're like, but we have a twist that you never thought about or asked for, with letting you play as Zelda and giving her the cool like wand abilities. And it's like, okay, that's I don't know what that is. I want to mess around with that. That seems really cool. So
It
yeah,
is pretty dope.
yeah, I'll say Echoes of Wisdom. That's the day one for me.
Okay, so that's the most exciting game. New Zelda, where you actually play as Zelda. All right, and then the next question is if you, and this is like one of my favorite questions for the show. If you were to revive two dead IPs right now and slap a triple A, and slap a triple A budget on it, what would those two IPs be?
I will say Beautiful Joe.
Wow.
I love Beautiful Joe. I don't understand how those games have not at least been remastered. Like they've never been
I ain't
ported.
seen Beautiful Joe since the GameCube.
It's like we can't even get an HD remaster and just put those on modern consoles to make them accessible because they're still trapped on their old, PS2, GameCube, or whatever.
That's such a comic book styled game.
But imagine too, like just the visuals of that game. Imagine like a modern spin with those visuals, like with today's technology, with the already strong art direction that game has. Like it would, and like going back to frame rate, like that how fast paced that brawler is. Like slap 60 FPS on Beautiful Joe. that thing would slap so hard. And then, what haven't we seen in a while? Mega Man Legends. I love Mega Man Legends. I love Mega Man, but I was so excited for Mega Man Legends 3. Like, I was like, I'm buying a 3DS to get that day one. This is going to be great because I love those Legends games. And then, like, the cancellation of that game still hurts me. So I would love Capcom to go back to the drawing board and maybe give it a second chance.
All right. Mega Man and what was the other game that you put?
Yeah, Mega Man Legends 3 and
Beautiful Joe.
Yeah, or I guess Mega Man Legends, the series, I guess, as a whole.
Okay, now my last question that I got for you. And it's kind of a compounded, it's pretty much two questions.
Also, I just realized my last two answers were both Capcom properties.
Hey, man.
Maybe Capcom, if you're listening, you can make it happen, man. You guys are already in the business of reviving old games with all those fighting collections and stuff that you're doing. So let's get on it.
Hey, Capcom's been on the up and up.
I mean, they've been on a roll for years now. Like this renaissance that they've been on since 2017, they've been. So honestly,
since Street Fighter 5.
Yeah, since RE7, I was like, yeah, they've been the hit makers over there.
No doubt. So, yeah. Last two questions, I guess I'll just say it like that. What frustrates you about gaming in general? Like, just if you were to put everything that has to do with gaming under an umbrella, what frustrates you about it? And then also the second question is, what would be your dream come true? So going ahead and talk about what frustrates you first.
I feel like I get more annoyed with gamers more than gaming sometimes.
Sure.
Again, we like when we talked about just like the sort of the lack of understanding around how games work and how the industry works, which is some of it is the fault of the industry because I think the game industry is a little too secretive sometimes for its own good compared to film.
Magical, right?
Yeah, and it does, and so like that contributes to people not really having a realistic grasp of how things work. But then you hear the reason for that is because if you show things too early for whatever reason on like film, gamers take it to heart of like, well, you showed us this early thing 2 years ago, so I expect it to be in the game now. It's like, well, we changed it because things changed. So it's like, oh, you lied. It's like we didn't lie. Things change, man. So there's just things that it shouldn't bother me as much as it should, and it's something I'm working on when I see someone just like people again being so passionate about console wars. I think it's the dumbest thing ever, regardless of which side of the fence you are. Like if the people that go out of their way to try to make people feel bad just because they play on another platform than you do, because you've decided that being loyal to one platform as a replacement for a personality is like, it's like, hey, it's fine to have your favorites. Like I own everything and I like, there's pros and cons to all of them, but like, I'm not going to go out and defend a plastic box I was like, unless you're a shareholder where you have like actual stakes, like you have real skin in the game, then like, why are you arguing for billion-dollar companies? Who cares? Like, why does it bother you so much where someone decides what they want to play and where? Just, and we all like games, right? Just let people play what they want to play. So yeah, and then what was the second part of the question?
The second part was what would be a dream come true in gaming, and I want you to be a little selfish with this.
A dream come true in video games. What does that mean? I mean, I guess on the industry side, every studio has a healthy work-life balance and
I love it.
uh, gets paid good, livable wages and doesn't have to crunch while still being able to create the things that they want to create in a realistic manner to where they come out well. So, which I mean, that would have a trickle down effect for the rest of the industry, right? Because then people are happier. Maybe game studios don't get shut down as much. You know, then games are probably better just because of that. So yeah, I guess that's the opposite of selfish. I'm wishing it for other people, but then I would benefit from it too, right? It's like, oh, the games are better, and you feel better when like the game that you like is made by people that are happy and not like killing themselves to make what you love, right?
No doubt. No,
Yeah.
for real.
So yeah, I go that like just being better in the industry, like just let's just things have been so rough with layoffs over the last 2 years. Obviously, I know I'm intimately familiar with that. But it's sad to see so many studios close, and a lot of them do good work and have enjoyed their stuff. So less of that would be a dream come true.
Yeah, shout out to Tango. It's good that they ended up going with what was it, Crafton, I believe.
Yeah, Crafton scooped them up. So yeah,
awesome.
that's like a rare, like, good news. Okay, there we go.
The Volition just sitting over there like, damn. Like
yeah, like I mean, the Ready at Dawn closure happened not long after us. And I was like, geez, okay. So yeah, and again, that also helps the future because the more layoffs there are, it's harder to get new people into space because they're discouraged about how unstable the industry looks, right?
Right. No, 100%. Yeah.
You're like, oh, I want to do games, but like, is that a good idea for like long term just career and financial health?
Yeah. You look at Bungie and you're like, yo, I don't know about all that.
Yeah, so for the sake of just having more new voices, new ideas, new concepts, just new blood in the industry, you only get that with a healthy industry. So let's get that. Let's make that happen.
No doubt. Well, Marcus, we've reached the end of the show, and I wanted to thank you so much again for being a guest here on the TSWS Gaming YouTube channel. What I'd like you to do before I go on ahead and roll us up out of here is just one last time let everybody know where they can find you.
Yes, I am on Twitter at Marcus Stewart 7, which is the number 7. You can find me on my Twitch channel, Marcus Streams Games. I've been streaming there pretty regularly. And you can also check out my latest gig over at The Indie Informer. You just type in theindieinformer.com, should get you there, but I'm a contributor there. And then various freelancing stuff. So you'll probably see me in just other random sites. Like most recently, I did a couple of Gamescom previews for Polygon. So yeah, but if you want to keep up with all of my endeavors, I guess probably my Twitter account is probably the easiest way. I usually post everything that I'm up to over there.
No doubt, and I put it up on here on the screen so you guys can see it for yourself. Mr. Marcus Stewart at Marcus Stewart 7. In case you want to go check him out, follow him. See some of his articles that he's been putting on Screen Rant, Fan Bite Media, Hard Drive, and Polygon and stuff like that. He does amazing work, and as you guys can see here, he's a pretty down to earth brother. Good. It was really good to have you here. I know I keep saying that, but I can't deny my appreciation. So it just is what it is. Thank you. And anything that we should look forward to from Marcus.
Ooh, there's a few things in the fire coming out. Other podcasts coming out this week. I'm on the MinMax show again this week, talking about Gamescom. I'll be on All Things Nintendo, hosted by my old coworker Brian Shea this week. Doing another MinMax thing Monday. And then some other stuff I can't talk about yet, but stay tuned.
No doubt. So he's pouring the gasoline. He's about to light it. So y'all make sure y'all go on ahead and follow him. But I appreciate everybody that came here to watch. As I said prior, make sure you hit that like button, share this thing out. And if you're new to the channel, we'd love to have you back for another time for you to sit down, watch another creator, developer, or writer come through and talk about their gaming and whatnot. But as for you guys, I will see you tomorrow for Bull Sitting with me, Loke, Cozy Beluga, Matt Likes Games, and a special guest, Nate, that will be coming with us. JRPG, and Nate, he plays all the JRPGs, big fan of that. But I appreciate everybody. Y'all have a wonderful rest of the day. Stay safe. And as I always say, this is your boy Ham Solo signing out from TSWS Gaming. Make sure that you keep it gaming or keep it moving. Peace out, y'all.